and many have indeed disagreed. Critics have stated that France should invest more in massive amounts of armored infantry fighting vehicles and tanks instead. After all, we've seen the evidence of how much attrition could potentially eat away at equipment quickly. And a quick look at France reveals they have one of the largest populations and GDPs in all of Europe, with 67.5 million people and $2.9 trillion a year. They've historically been very geopolitically important in this region, partially due to their massive coastline along the Atlantic Ocean, the English Channel, and the Mediterranean Sea. These waterways help to facilitate trade and transportation with their neighbors. They have useful natural defensive geography with the Rhine River and the towering Alps in the south. They're at the crossroads between Northern and Southern Europe, as well as between Eastern and Western Europe. This is why, historically speaking, France has always played a major role in European security, but we'll see they want to play an even bigger part. Due in part to these factors, it'd be possible for them to raise a large standing army with massive stockpiles of tanks if they wanted to return to a Cold War era way of life. I don't claim to know what the right answer is, but we can look at some of the evidence for what their line of thinking is. De Gaulle was a strong supporter of his nation's ability to govern itself without unwanted influence from external states. During his presidency, Charles de Gaulle made efforts to grant independence to former French colonies in Africa. He supported autonomy in Africa with the decolonization movements throughout the 1960s, to an extent. However, that doesn't mean he didn't keep strong French economic and military influences in the region. The nations that gained independence during this period include Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. You can feel it in their DNA when you try to ask them for directions to Paris in English and you're met with French instead. The message is clear. You're not going to make them behave in a certain way. One of the famous French strategic decisions that I think is best understood through this lens of sovereignty is when Charles de Gaulle pulled France out of NATO in 1966. That meant no French soldiers would be under NATO command, which he felt was controlled too much by America. De Gaulle said, quote, "France will not be led by an alliance over which it does not have control." Why would France or anyone want to leave NATO, hypothetically? Well, partly because of one of the disadvantages of a security alliance is that you're bound to the framework of that regulation. Leaving arguably allowed France to assert strategic autonomy over its own nuclear arsenal. At this moment, the Iron Curtain that had divided Europe for decades had already been torn down. During this time period between the 1980s and 1990s, French society underwent a massive transformation that saw the privatization of banking and telecommunications. France joined the European Union, which was established in 1992, and suddenly the risk of war with any of their European buddies seemed more and more like some kind of distant dream. In response to this changing security situation, French president announced sweeping military reforms that saw their armed forces shrink by about a third, down from 500,000 to 180,000 active duty, and then they became an all-volunteer force by 2001. Jacques Chirac also removed one leg of France's strategic nuclear triad, so they no longer have any surface-to-surface launched nuclear missile capabilities.